Good evening. No Baptists in the crowd. It's all right. Tonight's gospel contains a teeth-gritting, plain-spoken list of imperatives. Unfortunately for Christians like ourselves, these verses have reverberated well outside the walls of our churches and into mainstream consciousness. They are often quoted in pointing out the hypocritical behavior of Christians. Tisk tisk. I thought you were supposed to turn the other cheek. Why is the church so judgmental when Jesus explicitly says not to judge? These questions are annoying, but poignant, very poignant. And yet what troubles me worst of all is one verse in the middle of the list. Give to everyone who asks. Give to everyone who asks. Something inside of me, probably from CPE, yearns to cry out, Jesus, now this seems rather unsustainable, doesn't it? Among the listed imperatives Jesus sets before us, this strikes me as the most challenging. It is in tension with everything I've learned about in the past 2 years about balance and self-care. Does Jesus really mean I should accept every invitation to serve on a committee? Do any favor? Always have a zero balance in my bank account? Last one's easier than the rest, but... Is this merely classic Jesus hyperbole, able to be written off? What would become of us if we accepted his invitation? What would become of us? When pondering this image of a stump struck me, not a biblical stump, no, one from a much smaller book. And, best of all, it has pictures. Shel Silverstein's Giving Tree. Anybody in the audience familiar with it? Looking for little hands maybe too? Okay, there we go. This story begins with a tree and a boy delighting in one another. The boy makes a crown of the tree's leaves, scurries up and down the trunk, savors the sweetness of her apples, and sleeps under the protection of her shade. And the boy loved the tree very much, and the tree was happy. But the boy's visits become less and less frequent. Each time he returns, he asks for something that she cannot give. But she always finds something of herself to give instead, so the boy will be happy. And then she is happy. But with each turn of the page, the tree seems less and less able to satisfy the boy's desires. The tree becomes less and less relevant to the boy. And it hurts. It hurts us, the readers, too. Gone are the juicy apples that gave the boy such a good taste in his mouth. Gone are the branches, those branches that gave the boy such fun and protected his naps from the sun. Gone is the trunk that gave him such exciting perspectives over his world. No, by the end of the story, the tree has given away all of herself. And this hurts, and it makes us ache with empathy because we know her pain. We know what it's like not to be enough. So is that our end if we really want to follow Jesus? Are we destined to be like a cold stump, finally after doing all we could, giving all we had, finally being happy, but not really? I think not. I think in this parable, Jesus, like all great teachers, is assigning something to his disciples that maybe they won't complete, but maybe they won't have to. They'll learn the lesson before they get to that point. What can a stump give? Nothing. And yet at the end, the boy, now an old man, delights in her. There's something to that tree greater than what she can give. She is more than her usefulness, than her relevance. Some of the work of being Christian is detaching ourselves from relevance, from our ability to do things, to give things. Henry Nouwen, maybe the Shel Silverstein of seminary, and a familiar priest to us all. He writes, "I'm deeply convinced that the Christian leader of the future is called to be completely irrelevant and to stand in this world with nothing to offer but his or her own vulnerable self. That is the way Jesus came to reveal God's love. The tree is certainly her most vulnerable at the end of the story. She has nothing left to give. And as Nouwen notes, is this not the way that God came to us in Jesus, naked and vulnerable, with nothing yet to give? Maybe. Jesus wants us to get rid of our coats, our limbs, our apples, our trunks, so we can start giving what can only be given when we have nothing left. Our hearts, our warm, vulnerable hearts. When we are left with nothing to make us relevant, nothing with which to impress, to intimidate, to manipulate, we are able to give as Jesus gives. We are able to love as Jesus loves. With each thing we give away, we come to know a little bit more about the heart of Jesus. Knowing God's heart means consistently, radically, and very concretely to announce and reveal that God is love and only love. And that every time fear, isolation, or despair begins to invade the human soul, this is not something that comes from God. God delights in you unconditionally. And here comes the mystery. When you share your most vulnerable self with others, the laws of conservation begin to erode. What you give becomes so much more powerful because when it returns, it always overwhelms you. The image Luke paints at the end is like this. You'd hold your shirt out and try and collect it all, but it always pours off into your lap. A little bit more from now on. Knowing the heart of Jesus and loving him are the same thing. The knowledge of Jesus' heart is a knowledge of all hearts. And when we live in a world with that knowledge, we cannot do other than bring healing, reconciliation, new life, and hope wherever we go. The desire to be relevant and successful will gradually disappear. And our only desire will be to say with our whole being to our brothers and sisters of the human race, you are loved. There is no reason to be afraid. And love, God created you, your inmost being, knit you together in your mother's womb. One who is overflowing with a love like this can only give it away. So, beloved, love as Christ loves, so that you might give to everyone who asks and ask nothing in return. Oh, what would become of us then?